Right now, at this exact moment, you are living inside a version of reality created by a single decision. Maybe it was a tiny choice. You woke up 5 minutes earlier, you checked your phone, you decided to watch this video. But what if that simple decision created another version of you somewhere else? Another you who never clicked this video. Another you who chose something different this morning and slowly drifted into a completely different life. A different job, different friends, different dreams, maybe even a different personality. It sounds like science fiction, but for centuries, philosophers, historians, and physicists have asked a strange question that refuses to disappear. What if every decision splits reality, creating countless versions of ourselves? If that idea is true, then somewhere out there exists a version of you who took every path you didn't. The brave version, the fearful version, the successful version, the one who failed and learned something incredible. And history itself might not be a single timeline, but an endless forest of possibilities. Tonight, we're stepping into one of the most mind-bending questions humanity has ever faced. Not just what happened in history, but what could have happened. And by the end of this journey, you might start wondering something unsettling. If every choice creates a new version of you, which one is the real you? But before we step into this strange maze of possibilities, if you enjoy deep stories that make you question reality, history, and the universe itself, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel grow and lets me bring you more cinematic stories like this. And I'm always curious about the people watching these videos, so in the comments tell me, where are you watching from? Or what job or dream are you chasing right now? Somewhere in the world, someone with the exact same dream might be watching this too. Now, let's begin our journey, because to understand how every choice might create a new version of you, we have to travel back thousands of years to a moment when humans first realized something strange about time itself. The first question humanity ever asked was not about gods or stars or the meaning of life. It was something much smaller, yet infinitely more dangerous. What if I chose differently? Imagine a prehistoric human standing at the edge of a forest nearly 40,000 years ago. The air is cold. The wind moves slowly through tall grass, carrying the scent of animals somewhere beyond the hills. Hunger sits heavy in the stomach. Survival depends on every decision. To go left toward the dark trees, or right toward the open plains. To hunt or to hide. To trust the stranger approaching from the distance, or to run. Every moment of life was balanced on the edge of a decision. But something strange was happening inside the human mind, something no other creature seemed capable of. The ability to imagine a different version of reality. Not just what is, but what could have been. When a hunter missed a spear throw, he didn't simply move on like a wolf would. He replayed the moment in his mind. What if I threw earlier? What if I aimed lower? What if I never followed that animal at all? In that instant, a new invisible world appeared inside the human brain, a shadow reality made of alternate possibilities. And that might have been the moment the multiverse of human choices was born. Because every choice carries two ghosts, the path taken and the path abandoned. Archaeologists studying early human culture have found something fascinating. In cave paintings from places like Lascaux Cave and Altamira Cave, ancient humans didn't just paint animals or hunting scenes. They painted multiple versions of movement. A deer with several overlapping legs, a bison shown in shifting positions. Some researchers believe these weren't mistakes. They were attempts to capture motion, a primitive animation. But others suggest something deeper. Perhaps early humans were trying to capture possibility itself, not just what the animal is running, but every way it might run. Think about that for a moment. Thousands of years before science, philosophy, or mathematics, humans were already imagining alternate outcomes. That ability became the engine of civilization, because the moment you imagine another possibility, you gained the power to change reality. A tribe that imagined a better hunting strategy survived. A traveler who imagined a safer route discovered new lands. A thinker who imagined a different explanation for lightning created the foundations of science. Human history is not simply a sequence of events, it is a forest of decisions. Every war, discovery, revolution, and accident began with someone standing at a crossroads, often unaware that history itself was waiting on their choice. Take a moment in the year 49 BCE. A Roman general stands beside a shallow river in northern Italy. The night is quiet, but tension fills the air. On the other side of the river lies Rome, and a law that forbids any general from entering with an army. Crossing the river means rebellion. Not crossing means surrendering power. The man looks at the water. His name is Julius Caesar. The river is called the Rubicon. History tells us Caesar made his decision. He crossed. But pause the story right there, because the moment before he stepped into the water might be one of the most important moments in human history. Imagine the other version of reality. A Caesar who hesitates, a Caesar who turns back. No civil war, no dictatorship, perhaps no Roman Empire as we know it. One decision, two entirely different worlds. And Caesar probably didn't feel like he was creating alternate universes. He was simply choosing a path. That's the strange thing about choices. From the inside, they feel small. From the outside, they shape centuries. Another moment arrives in 1492. A sailor from Genoa stands before the Spanish crown, arguing that sailing west across the ocean could lead to Asia. Most experts believe he is wrong. The ocean is too vast, the journey impossible. But Queen Isabella listens. The sailor's name is Christopher Columbus, and the choice she makes will change the entire planet. But again, imagine the other possibility. What if she said no? What if the ships never sailed? What if the continents remained separated for another century? History as we know it begins to fracture the moment we ask that question, because every turning point contains invisible versions of history that never happened. And those invisible histories raise a haunting possibility. If every choice creates a different outcome, could every choice create a different version of you? Not just metaphorically, but literally. For most of human history, this idea belonged only to philosophy and imagination. Ancient thinkers wondered about fate versus free will. Religions debated whether life was predetermined or shaped by human choices. Writers and poets imagined alternate destinies. But no one believed these other paths actually existed until the 20th century. In 1957, a young physicist at Princeton University proposed something so strange that even many scientists rejected it at first. His name was Hugh Everett III, and his idea was radical. What if reality doesn't choose one outcome? What if every possible outcome actually happens, but in separate branching universes? In other words, every decision might split reality like a tree growing new branches. One branch where Caesar crosses the Rubicon, another where he turns back. One branch where Columbus sails, another where he never leaves Spain. And somewhere among those infinite branches, there may be countless versions of you. One version who made the choices you made today, another who chose differently, another who never opened this video at all. For most people, this sounds like science fiction, but strangely, modern physics does not entirely rule it out. Because deep inside the strange world of quantum mechanics, the science that governs atoms and particles, reality behaves in ways that seem almost impossible. Particles can exist in multiple states at once. Outcomes can remain uncertain until they are observed, and probabilities can collapse into reality in ways we still struggle to fully understand. Some interpretations suggest that instead of collapsing into one outcome, the universe might simply split, again and again, endlessly. If that idea is true, then every moment of decision might create new versions of existence, new timelines, new identities, new lives. But that raises a question far more personal than physics. If another version of you exists somewhere, living a different life shaped by different choices, which one is the real you? The answer to that question begins with a moment in history when humanity discovered that reality itself was far more strange than anyone had imagined. A discovery that didn't happen in an ancient cave, or a royal palace, or on a battlefield. It happened inside a simple laboratory, where a simple experiment revealed that the universe might not follow a single path after all. And that experiment would change the way we understand choice, identity, and existence itself. Because the next step in this story takes us to the birth of quantum physics and a discovery that made scientists realize something unsettling. Reality may not be as singular as it appears. It may be branching every second, including the second you decided to keep watching. And the moment humanity realized this, everything about the nature of choice began to change. The moment a single decision changed history. History often looks solid when we read it in books. Dates feel permanent, events feel inevitable. Empires rise and fall as if the world had always been moving toward those outcomes. But if you zoom in closely enough, history begins to look less like a straight road and more like a tightrope stretched across countless possibilities. Because many of the most important moments in human civilization balanced on something incredibly fragile: a hesitation, a message arriving too late, a decision made in seconds. And once historians began examining those moments carefully, they noticed something unsettling. If even one of those decisions had gone differently, the world we know might never have existed. Take a cold October morning in 732 CE. Two massive armies stand facing each other on a field somewhere in what is now France. The tension is almost unbearable. Soldiers grip their weapons while waiting for a command that will determine the fate of entire civilizations. On one side stands an expanding Islamic force led by the general Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi. On the other side is a Frankish army commanded by Charles Martel. The confrontation will later be remembered as the Battle of Tours. For days, the two armies wait. Neither side attacks immediately. And that hesitation changes everything. Charles Martel chooses patience instead of aggression. He keeps his soldiers in defensive formation, forcing the opposing army to break its momentum. The decision works. When the battle finally begins, the Frankish lines hold firm and the invading force is pushed back. Historians often debate how much this moment truly changed the course of Europe, but one thing is clear. If Martel had chosen differently, if he had rushed forward, if his lines had collapsed, the political and cultural map of Europe might have unfolded along a completely different path. Languages might be different today. Borders might not exist where they do now, and entire cultures could have developed in unfamiliar ways, all because one commander chose patience instead of attack. Moments like this are scattered everywhere across the timeline of human history. Consider another decision made almost 1,000 years later, during the chaotic years of exploration. In 1519, a Portuguese sailor sets out on an incredibly risky journey under the Spanish crown. His plan is bold: sail west and reach the Spice Islands by navigating around the globe. The voyage is dangerous beyond imagination. Ships break, crews mutiny, storms tear through the ocean, but the explorer pushes forward. His name is Ferdinand Magellan. At several points during the expedition, Magellan is faced with choices that could end the journey. Turning back would save lives. Continuing could destroy everything. Again and again, he chooses to continue. Magellan himself will not survive the voyage, but his expedition will complete the first circumnavigation of the Earth, proving something humanity had never fully demonstrated before. The planet is one continuous world. That realization reshapes trade, navigation, science, and global connection. But imagine the moment when the crew considered mutiny. Imagine if they had forced the ships to return. Perhaps the first circumnavigation would happen decades later. Perhaps someone else would receive the credit. Perhaps global exploration would unfold more slowly. History doesn't announce these turning points when they happen. They feel ordinary at the time. Only later do we realize how delicate they were. Sometimes the decision that changes history isn't made by kings or generals. Sometimes it's made by someone nobody expected. In 1914, a young man sits in a cafe in Sarajevo, frustrated and disappointed. Earlier that day, he had failed to carry out a dangerous mission.
His target had passed by too quickly. The opportunity was gone. The young man decides to buy a sandwich. At almost the exact same moment, a driver taking a wrong turn accidentally stops a car directly in front of the cafe. Inside the car sits Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The young man cannot believe what he is seeing. His name is Gavrilo Princip, and what happens next will ignite the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Within weeks, alliances activate across Europe. Nations declare war. The world plunges into the chaos of World War I. But historians still pause at that tiny moment. The wrong turn, the cafe, the sandwich. What if the driver never made that mistake? What if the car kept moving? What if the assassin finished his lunch and went home? The First World War might not begin that day. The entire 20th century might unfold differently. No trench warfare in Europe, no Russian Revolution triggered by the war, perhaps even no second global conflict decades later. The deeper historians dig into the past, the more they see how fragile events truly are. History isn't a massive machine moving in one inevitable direction. It is more like a domino chain balanced carefully on a table. Remove one domino, and the entire pattern collapses into something new. This realization has fascinated historians for decades. Some call it counterfactual history, the study of what might have happened if key decisions had been different. What if Napoleon Bonaparte had won at the Battle of Waterloo? What if Abraham Lincoln had not been assassinated after the American Civil War? What if certain scientific discoveries had arrived centuries earlier, or never at all? Each of those questions creates an alternate version of history, a different timeline, a different world. And for centuries, these alternate histories remained only in imagination, interesting thought experiments, fascinating stories, but nothing more. The universe that splits itself. At the beginning of the 20th century, scientists believed they were close to understanding the universe completely. Physics seemed almost finished. The laws of motion described how objects moved. Gravity explained the motion of planets. Electricity and magnetism had been unified into elegant equations. To many researchers, it felt like the puzzle of reality was nearly solved. But deep inside laboratories across Europe, a series of strange experiments began revealing something unsettling. The universe was not behaving the way anyone expected. The story begins with a quiet mystery involving light. For centuries, scientists had argued about what light actually was. Some believed it behaved like a wave, spreading smoothly through space. Others insisted it must be made of tiny particles. Both ideas seemed convincing. But then, experiments began producing results that made the situation far stranger. One of the most famous experiments involved something called the double-slit experiment, a deceptively simple setup that would shake the foundations of physics. Imagine a wall with two narrow slits cut into it. Behind the wall sits a screen that can detect tiny impacts. A beam of light is directed toward the slits so it can pass through and strike the screen behind. If light were made of particles, the result should be simple. The particles would travel through either one slit or the other and create two clusters of impacts on the screen. But that's not what happened. Instead, the screen showed a strange pattern of bright and dark bands, a pattern known as interference. This pattern only appears when waves overlap and interact with each other. It seemed to confirm that light was behaving like a wave. But then, scientists tried something even stranger. They lowered the intensity of the light until individual particles, single photons, were being fired through the slits one at a time. Logically, each photon should pass through one slit or the other and create two clusters of impacts on the screen. Yet even when fired individually, the interference pattern slowly appeared again. Each particle behaved as if it had passed through both slits at once. For scientists trying to make sense of reality, this result was deeply disturbing. How could a single particle travel through two different paths simultaneously? The mathematics describing this behavior became the foundation of a new field known as quantum mechanics. And within that strange mathematical framework emerged an idea called superposition. Superposition suggested that tiny particles do not exist in one definite state until they are measured. Instead, they exist as a cloud of probabilities, many possible states overlapping at once. In other words, reality at the smallest scale behaves less like a solid object and more like a set of possibilities waiting to be resolved. One of the scientists helping develop this theory was the Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger. Schrödinger quickly realized how bizarre the implications of quantum mechanics were becoming. To demonstrate the problem, he proposed a thought experiment that has haunted scientists ever since. Imagine a sealed box. Inside the box is a cat along with a small device connected to a radioactive atom. The atom has a 50% chance of decaying within the next hour. If the atom decays, the device releases poison and the cat dies. If the atom does not decay, the cat remains alive. According to the mathematics of quantum mechanics, until someone opens the box and observes the outcome, the atom exists in both states simultaneously, decayed and not decayed. And because the cat's fate depends on the atom, the cat must also exist in a strange combined state, alive and dead, at the same time. This thought experiment became known as Schrödinger's cat. Schrödinger himself didn't propose it because he believed cats could truly exist in such bizarre states. He meant it as a criticism, a way to show how strange the theory sounded when applied to everyday objects. But the deeper physicists examined the mathematics, the harder it became to dismiss the implications. Quantum mechanics kept working. Every experiment confirmed its predictions with astonishing precision. Electrons behaved like waves and particles simultaneously. Atoms occupied multiple energy states at once. Particles remained connected across enormous distances through a phenomenon called quantum entanglement. Reality, it seemed, was far stranger than anyone had imagined. One of the leading figures trying to interpret this strange new world was the Danish physicist Niels Bohr. Bohr proposed an interpretation that many scientists eventually accepted. According to his view, quantum possibilities collapse into a single outcome when they are observed. Before observation, a system exists in many possible states. But the moment a measurement occurs, reality chooses one. This idea became known as the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. For decades, it served as the standard explanation.
But it left a troubling question unanswered. What exactly counts as an observation? Does a human observer cause the collapse? Does any measurement device do it? Or does reality simply decide on its own? Even more troubling, the Copenhagen interpretation suggested that possibilities vanish the moment reality chooses one outcome. But some physicists began wondering something radical. What if those possibilities never vanish at all? What if they continue existing somewhere else? The idea lingered quietly at the edges of scientific thought for years. Most physicists focused on using quantum mechanics rather than debating its deeper meaning. But in the 1950s, a young graduate student began thinking about the problem differently. Instead of asking how possibilities collapse into one outcome, he asked a much more daring question. What if collapse never happens? What if every possibility continues to exist? The student's name was Hugh Everett III, and the idea he proposed would become one of the most mind-bending theories ever suggested in science. If Everett was right, then the strange behavior of particles might mean something extraordinary. The universe might not choose between possibilities. It might simply create new realities for each one. Every quantum event would split the universe into separate branches. One branch where a particle goes left, another where it goes right, another where it does something entirely different. At first, many scientists dismissed the idea as absurd. But Everett's theory carried a strange elegance. It removed the mysterious collapse of possibilities. It treated the mathematics of quantum mechanics exactly as written. And it suggested something astonishing about the nature of reality. The universe might be constantly branching into countless versions of itself. Every second, every decision, every interaction between particles. If that is true, then the implications stretch far beyond physics. Because if the universe splits for every possible outcome, then somewhere among those endless branches might exist different versions of history, different versions of Earth, different versions of humanity, and perhaps different versions of you. In the next chapter, we'll explore Everett's radical theory in full and the strange possibility that every choice you make might be creating an entirely new universe. The Many Worlds Theory. In 1957, inside the quiet halls of Princeton University, a young graduate student submitted a doctoral thesis that would quietly challenge one of the deepest assumptions humans had ever made about reality. The student was Hugh Everett III. At first glance, Everett did not look like someone preparing to disrupt physics. He was calm, thoughtful, and intensely analytical. But the idea forming in his mind was anything but ordinary. For decades, physicists had struggled with a troubling mystery inside quantum mechanics. Particles behaved like waves of possibilities. Electrons seemed to occupy multiple states at once. Photons could pass through two slits simultaneously. But whenever scientists tried to measure the outcome of these possibilities, reality appeared to collapse into a single result: one particle location, one energy level, one definite event. To explain this strange transition, physicists like Niels Bohr argued that observation somehow forces reality to choose. Possibilities collapse. One outcome becomes real. The rest disappear. But Everett found something deeply unsatisfying about that explanation. Why should reality depend on observation? What exactly counts as an observer? A human? A machine? A single atom interacting with another atom? The Copenhagen interpretation seemed to rely on a mysterious boundary between the quantum world and the classical world, a boundary no one could clearly define. Everett wondered if there was another way to interpret the equations. So he did something simple yet incredibly bold. He trusted the mathematics completely. Instead of forcing the equations to collapse into one outcome,
Everett asked what would happen if the wave function, the mathematical description of all possible states, never collapsed at all. The result was astonishing. According to Everett's interpretation, every possible outcome of a quantum event continues to exist, but not in the same place. Each outcome exists in its own branch of reality. In other words, the universe doesn't choose one possibility and discard the others. It splits. Every time a quantum event occurs, reality divides into separate worlds, each containing a different outcome. This idea became known as the many worlds theory. At first, the theory sounded almost like science fiction. Imagine flipping a coin. In the traditional view, the coin lands either heads or tails. But in Everett's universe, both outcomes happen. Reality splits into two branches, one universe where the coin lands heads, another where it lands tails. Now imagine this happening not just with coins, but with every quantum event in existence, every photon interaction, every electron movement, every atomic reaction. The universe would not remain a single timeline. It would become a constantly branching structure, like a tree growing new limbs every fraction of a second. The scale of this branching quickly becomes unimaginable. In a single second, trillions of quantum events occur across the universe. Each one could create new branches of reality, which means the number of universes would increase at an astonishing rate. By the time you finish this sentence, countless new realities may have formed, each slightly different from the one you are experiencing. At first, most physicists ignored Everett's idea. The theory sounded extravagant. An infinite number of universes? Reality constantly splitting? It seemed too strange to take seriously. Even Everett's advisor, the famous physicist John Archibald Wheeler, struggled to convince others of its importance. Everett eventually left academic physics entirely, moving into government research and defense analysis. For years, his idea remained mostly unnoticed. But something strange happened as decades passed. Physicists kept returning to the problem of quantum interpretation, and again, Everett's theory quietly refused to disappear. Because, while it sounded unbelievable, it solved certain problems elegantly. The equations of quantum mechanics never require a collapse. They naturally describe multiple possibilities evolving simultaneously. The many worlds interpretation simply accepts what the mathematics already suggests. No mysterious collapse, no special role for observers. Just a universe where every possibility unfolds somewhere. By the 1970s and 1980s, some physicists began reconsidering Everett's work more seriously. Among them was Bryce DeWitt, who helped popularize the term many worlds. DeWitt described the idea in a way that captured the imagination of scientists and the public alike. Every decision, every quantum event, creates a new universe, a branching cosmos filled with countless alternate histories. If Everett's interpretation is correct, then somewhere out there exists a universe where history unfolded differently. A world where ancient civilizations took different paths. A world where certain empires never fell. A world where different discoveries happened earlier, or never happened at all. But the most unsettling implication of the many worlds theory is not about history. It's about you. Because your brain is made of atoms, your thoughts are influenced by quantum events occurring inside neurons. Tiny fluctuations that can affect decisions. And if quantum events can branch into different outcomes, then every decision you make might create separate versions of reality. One version where you turned left instead of right. One where you spoke a different sentence. One where you took a risk, and one where you didn't. These branches would contain different versions of you, each following a unique path through life. To the version of you reading this story right now, it feels like you chose a single path. But in Everett's universe, all possible paths might exist simultaneously. each one experienced by a different version of you. Imagine the implications. Somewhere there might be a version of you who pursued a completely different career, another who moved to a different country, another who met different people and formed different relationships. Each version shaped by choices, large and small, and none of them aware of the others. From the inside, each version feels like the original. Each version believes they are the one true continuation of your life. But from the outside, they are simply different branches of the same cosmic tree. For many people, this idea is both thrilling and unsettling. Thrilling because it suggests endless possibilities. Unsettling because it raises questions about identity, fate, and the meaning of choice. If every possible outcome happens somewhere, does choice still matter? Are we creating new worlds with every decision, or are we simply moving through branches that already exist? Physicists still debate these questions today. The many worlds interpretation remains one of several ways to understand quantum mechanics. Some scientists believe it may be correct. Others argue that the idea creates too many universes to be plausible. But regardless of which interpretation turns out to be true, Everett's theory forced humanity to confront a radical possibility. Reality might be far larger and more complex than we ever imagined. Not a single timeline stretching from past to future, but a constantly branching structure filled with alternate versions of everything. Alternate histories, alternate Earths, alternate lives. And if that is true, then somewhere among those countless branches might exist versions of you who made very different choices. The successful version, the cautious version, the version who followed a dream or abandoned it. Each living in their own universe, shaped by a different decision. But that leads to an even more personal question. If countless versions of you might exist, what separates you from them? What makes this particular life, the one you are experiencing right now, feel like the real one? To answer that question, we need to explore something far more mysterious than physics: the nature of identity itself. Because the next chapter will confront a possibility that feels almost impossible to imagine. That somewhere, in another branch of reality, there may exist a version of you who is living a completely different life at this very moment.
The versions of you that might exist. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and realizing that somewhere in a universe you will never see, another version of you is waking up too. He looks like you. He remembers the same childhood. He knows the same people. For most of his life, his story has been almost identical to yours. But somewhere along the timeline, a single moment split the path. A tiny decision changed, and slowly, the two lives drifted apart. At first, the difference might be so small you wouldn't even notice. Maybe one version of you chose to speak to someone on a bus stop. Another version stayed silent. One version decided to study harder for an exam. Another version said, "I'll do it tomorrow." One version accepted an opportunity. Another hesitated and missed it. Each of these choices might seem insignificant when they happen, but life is rarely shaped by dramatic turning points. More often, it is shaped by hundreds of small decisions that slowly steer us in different directions. Now imagine those tiny decisions branching into separate realities. According to the many worlds interpretation, every possible outcome of a quantum event could exist in its own universe. And because your brain is built from atoms obeying quantum laws, some scientists have wondered whether human decisions might also follow branching paths. If that idea holds even a small piece of truth, then somewhere across the vast landscape of reality, countless versions of you may exist. Some almost identical to you, others completely different. Picture a version of you who made a brave decision you were too afraid to make. Maybe they started the project you delayed. Maybe they moved to a new city. Maybe they followed a dream everyone else said was impossible.
At first, their life might look exactly like yours, but over time, the consequences of that one decision begin spreading outward. New friendships form, new skills develop, opportunities appear that your version of life never encountered. Years later, that version of you might barely resemble the person you became. Yet both of you started from the same place, both once shared the same memories, and both believed they were the one true version of you. The strange thing about identity is that it feels incredibly stable from the inside. When you look back on your life, you feel like the same person moving steadily through time. Childhood becomes adolescence, adolescence becomes adulthood. The memories change, but the sense of self seems continuous. But philosophers have long questioned whether that feeling of continuity is real. One of the earliest thinkers to challenge the idea of a fixed self was the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. He famously suggested that you cannot step into the same river twice. The water is always flowing, always changing, and perhaps the person stepping into the river is changing as well. Modern neuroscience has reinforced this idea in surprising ways. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself. New connections form between neurons. Old connections fade away. Memories evolve and reshape over time. Even the atoms inside your body are gradually replaced. The person you are today is not made from the same matter that existed in your body 10 years ago, and yet you still feel like the same individual. But what if identity is not a fixed object at all? What if it is more like a story, a narrative continuously written by experiences, choices, and chance events? If that's true, then different choices could create different stories, different versions of you. Now imagine the scale of possibilities. Every day you make dozens of decisions. Some are trivial, coffee or tea, walk this street or that one.
Watch this video or scroll past it. Others carry more weight. What career to pursue, where to live, who to trust. Each decision pushes your life slightly in one direction instead of another. But if multiple outcomes can exist in separate realities, then every road you didn't take might still be unfolding somewhere. Somewhere there may be a version of you who chose a completely different career, another who built a business, another who became an artist, another who faced failures you never experienced and grew stronger because of them. There might even be versions of you who never encountered the opportunities that shaped your life. Versions who live quieter, simpler lives. Versions who struggle. Versions who succeed in ways you never imagined. All branching outward from the same origin, the same childhood, the same early choices. At first, this idea might feel comforting. After all, if one version of you fails, another version might succeed. If one version gives up, another might keep going. But the idea also raises unsettling questions. If countless versions of you exist, each shaped by different choices, which one is truly you? Is the version you are experiencing right now special in some way? Or are you simply one branch among billions? Philosophers have wrestled with this problem for centuries. One thought experiment captures the dilemma perfectly. Imagine a machine that can perfectly copy a human being, every atom, every memory, every thought. You step into the machine. Moments later, two identical versions of you walk out. Both remember entering the machine. Both feel like the original. Both believe they are truly you. But only one of them can continue your exact life path. The other must begin a new one. Which one is the real person? The unsettling truth is that from the inside, both versions feel authentic. Both have the same memories. Both experience consciousness. Both believe they are the continuation of your identity. This thought experiment has fascinated philosophers and scientists alike because it reveals something strange about identity. Your sense of self might not depend on being unique. It might depend on something much simpler: continuity. The version of you reading this story feels like the real one because your consciousness has flowed continuously through your experiences. You remember yesterday, you remember childhood, you feel connected to the past that shaped you.
But if another version of you exists somewhere else, their consciousness may have followed a different path, different experiences, different memories, different decisions. From their perspective, they are just as real as you are, and they might wonder the same question. What if another version of me exists somewhere else? What if that version made different choices? What if their life turned out completely differently? In a universe that branches with every possibility, identity becomes something fluid, something that grows and diverges like branches of a tree. And yet, each branch feels like the true continuation of the original. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this idea isn't that alternate versions of you might exist. It's that the smallest decisions could determine which branch of reality you experience. Tiny moments that seem meaningless might slowly shape the entire direction of your life. And if the universe truly branches with every possibility, then the quiet choices you make today could lead to futures you cannot yet imagine. In the next chapter, we'll explore why the smallest decisions might matter more than the biggest ones, and how subtle changes can transform entire lives over time. Because history and identity may not be shaped by dramatic turning points alone. Sometimes the most powerful forces in life begin with choices so small we almost never notice them at all.
The weight of small decisions. When people imagine life-changing moments, they usually picture dramatic events, a job offer that alters a career, a life or death decision, a historic moment that reshapes nations. But reality rarely works that way. More often, the direction of a life is quietly altered by decisions so small they barely feel like decisions at all. A conversation you almost didn't have, a place you almost didn't go, a message you almost didn't send. And the strange truth about these tiny moments is that they tend to accumulate over time, slowly nudging the trajectory of a life in one direction instead of another. To understand how powerful small decisions can be, imagine standing at the top of a mountain range. Before you, two rivers begin from nearly the same point, separated by only a few centimeters. At the beginning, they look almost identical, but gravity pulls them in slightly different directions. One flows east, the other flows west. Hundreds of kilometers later, the two rivers end up in completely different oceans. Life often works the same way. Tiny choices made early can ripple forward through time, shaping events years or even decades later. Historians studying turning points in human civilization often discover that many monumental events began with something incredibly small. Take, for example, a quiet evening in 1928 inside a laboratory at St. Mary's Hospital. A scientist named Alexander Fleming returns from vacation and begins examining some petri dishes he had left behind. At first glance, the dishes appear contaminated. Most researchers would have thrown them away without a second thought. But Fleming pauses. He notices something unusual. A mold growing in one dish has killed the bacteria surrounding it. Instead of discarding the dish, he decides to study the phenomenon. That small decision leads to the discovery of penicillin. The impact of that discovery is almost impossible to measure. Millions of lives saved, modern medicine transformed, entire fields of treatment made possible. And yet, the moment that began it all looked completely ordinary. A scientist choosing to look closer instead of throwing something away. Now imagine the alternate possibility. Fleming tosses the dish into the trash. The discovery of antibiotics may be delayed by years, perhaps even decades. The ripple effects through medicine and history would be enormous, but no one in that laboratory would have realized the significance of the decision at the time. That's the strange thing about life. The biggest turning points rarely announce themselves. They hide inside moments that feel routine. And if the universe truly branches with every possibility, as suggested by the many worlds interpretation, then every small decision might lead to different versions of the future. Think about how many decisions you make in a single day. You decide when to wake up. You decide what to eat. You decide which route to take when traveling somewhere. Most of these choices seem trivial,
but each one slightly alters the sequence of events that follows. Choosing a different route might lead to meeting someone new. Starting a conversation might open an unexpected opportunity. Accepting a small challenge might develop a skill that becomes important years later. The world is filled with stories of people whose lives changed because of moments that seemed insignificant at the time. A writer receives a rejection letter but decides to try again. An inventor continues experimenting after dozens of failed attempts. A student decides to pursue an idea that everyone else dismissed. Over time, those small decisions accumulate. They slowly push a life onto a different path. And if there are multiple possible paths unfolding across different branches of reality, then the smallest decisions might determine which branch you experience. This idea can feel overwhelming. After all, if every choice creates a new possibility, how can anyone know which decision is the right one? But perhaps the point is not to find the perfect choice. Perhaps the point is simply to keep choosing, to keep moving forward. Because every decision, no matter how small, becomes part of the story that shapes who you become. Philosophers have long recognized the power of small actions.
The ancient Greek thinker Aristotle believed that character itself is built through repeated choices. According to Aristotle, virtues such as courage, kindness, and discipline are not traits people are born with. They are habits formed through small actions repeated over time. A single act of courage does not make someone brave, but choosing courage again and again slowly builds a courageous character. In the same way, a single moment of effort may not change a life, but thousands of moments of effort gradually transform the direction of a future. Modern psychology has reinforced this idea through research on habits and decision-making. Small actions performed consistently often have greater long-term impact than dramatic changes made once. Writing a few pages each day can eventually create a book. Practicing a skill for minutes each day can eventually create mastery. Learning something new every day can slowly reshape the way someone understands the world. From the inside, these small actions rarely feel dramatic. They feel ordinary. But over time, they build momentum, and momentum shapes destiny. Now, imagine this process unfolding across countless versions of reality. In one version of your life, you give up on a difficult goal. In another version, you persist just a little longer. That small difference slowly changes the direction of the story. Years later, the two versions of your life may look completely different, not because of a single dramatic event, but because of hundreds of tiny decisions accumulating over time. This perspective transforms the way we think about choice. It suggests that life is not defined by a few grand moments alone. It is defined by the quiet, repeated decisions we make every day. The moments no one else notices, the actions that seem too small to matter, because those moments may be the points where the branches of reality begin to diverge, where one version of the future slowly separates from another. And yet, even if countless versions of you might exist across different branches of reality, there is still something deeply unique about the version you are experiencing right now. Your consciousness, your memories, your awareness moving forward through time, which raises a deeper mystery. If many possible versions of you might exist, why do you experience only this one? Why does your awareness travel down this specific path instead of another? The answer leads us into one of the most puzzling questions in philosophy and science. What exactly is the self? What is the thing inside your mind that experiences reality? Because before we can understand which version of you is real, we must first understand what it even means to be you.
The psychological mystery of identity. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the very first memory you can recall. Maybe it's a small scene from childhood, a classroom filled with unfamiliar faces, a family gathering, A quiet afternoon somewhere that felt safe. That memory feels like it belongs to you, even though the person in that memory was younger, smaller, and knew far less about the world than you do now. There is still a thread connecting that moment to the person you are today. That thread is what we call identity. It is the quiet feeling that your life forms a continuous story. You were that child. You were the teenager who struggled with certain fears or dreams. You were the person who made the decisions that brought you here. But the deeper scientists and philosophers explore the nature of identity, the stranger it begins to appear. Because the self you experience may not be a permanent object at all. It may be something much more fragile, something that exists only because your brain is constantly reconstructing the story of who you are. One of the earliest thinkers to challenge the idea of a fixed identity was the Scottish philosopher David Hume. Hume made a startling observation. When he searched inside his own mind for the self, he couldn't find a stable entity. Instead, he found a stream of sensations, thoughts, memories, emotions appearing and disappearing. Hume concluded that the self might simply be a collection of experiences flowing through time, a bundle of perceptions held together by memory. If that is true, then identity might be less like a solid object and more like a story continuously written by the brain. Modern neuroscience has uncovered evidence that supports this unsettling possibility. Inside the brain, billions of neurons communicate through electrical and chemical signals. Memories are not stored as permanent recordings. They are reconstructed each time you remember them. The brain pieces together fragments of information to recreate the past, which means every time you remember an event, the memory itself can subtly change. Details shift, emotions reshape the interpretation. Over time, the memory becomes less like a photograph and more like a narrative, a story that evolves as your life continues. This raises an extraordinary possibility. The person you believe you are today might not be identical to the person you were 10 years ago, not just emotionally or intellectually, but neurologically. New neural pathways have formed, old ones have faded. Your personality itself may have shifted in ways too subtle to notice day by day. And yet, the sense of identity persists. Your mind continuously stitches together past experiences into a coherent narrative, a story that says, "This is me." But what if that story could split into different versions? What if different decisions create different narratives, different lives unfolding from the same origin? This idea becomes even more intriguing when we consider the possibility suggested by the many worlds interpretation. If reality truly branches into multiple possibilities, then each branch might contain a version of you whose story diverges slightly from the one you know. At first, the difference might be barely noticeable. Perhaps one version of you took a different class in school, another version met a friend on a different day, another version chose a different hobby. Small variations like these would slowly change the experiences shaping each mind. Over time, those differences accumulate, memories change, beliefs shift, goals evolve. Eventually, the versions of you in different branches of reality might become almost unrecognizable to one another. But from the inside, each version would feel authentic. Each would carry a personal history filled with memories and experiences. Each would believe they are the true continuation of the original life. This leads to one of the most unsettling questions about identity. If two versions of you share the same past but diverge in the present, which one is the real person? Philosophers have explored similar puzzles for centuries. One famous thought experiment was proposed by the English philosopher John Locke. Locke suggested that personal identity might depend primarily on memory. If you remember performing an action, then you are the same person who performed it. But this idea quickly runs into complications. What if memories fade? What if they are altered or replaced? Would that mean your identity changes as well? Later philosophers pushed the question even further. Imagine a scenario where your memories are copied into another brain. Both individuals would remember your life. Both would believe they are you, but they could not both occupy the same physical existence. Which one would truly be the continuation of your identity? These puzzles reveal something profound. Identity may not be a single fixed point. It might be more like a branching structure, a network of experiences evolving through time, each version shaped by different events and choices. If that is the case, then the self is not something that exists independently of time. It exists because your consciousness moves forward through experiences, linking them together. You feel like a single continuous person because your awareness travels along one path, one timeline, one sequence of events. But in a universe where multiple possibilities might exist, there could be countless other versions unfolding simultaneously, each one containing a version of you with a slightly different story. And yet, none of those other versions are accessible to you. Your awareness continues along the path created by the choices and events shaping your life. You remember yesterday, you experience today, you imagine tomorrow. Your consciousness moves through time like a traveler moving through a landscape, and that journey creates the sense of a unified self. But this raises a deeper mystery. Why does your awareness follow this particular path? Why this sequence of events instead of another? If countless versions of your life might exist across branching realities, why do you experience this one? Some philosophers.
The final question. Are we creating new universes right now? Right now, as you sit here watching this video, something extraordinary might be happening. Not somewhere far away in space, not billions of years ago at the beginning of the universe, but right here, in the quiet flow of the present moment. Reality might be branching again and again and again. Every blink of an eye, every movement of an atom, every decision inside your mind. For most of human history, people imagined the universe as a single unfolding story, one past, one present, one future, like a straight road stretching through time. But over the last century, physics has slowly revealed something far stranger. Reality may not be a road at all. It may be a vast tree, and every moment of possibility might be growing new branches. The idea traces back to the strange mathematics of quantum mechanics, the same theory that revealed particles behaving like waves, atoms existing in multiple states, and events that remain uncertain until measured. For decades, physicists struggled to explain how these possibilities collapse into a single outcome, but the radical proposal made by Hugh Everett III suggested something astonishing. Perhaps they never collapse at all. Perhaps every possible outcome continues to exist in its own branch of reality. This concept, now known as the many worlds interpretation, remains one of the most fascinating ideas in modern physics. And while scientists continue debating whether it truly describes the universe, the implications are almost impossible to ignore. If the many worlds interpretation is correct, then the universe is not simply expanding through space, it is expanding through possibility. Every quantum event could create a new path. Every interaction between particles could form another version of reality. Every choice could lead to a different future. Picture the universe not as a single timeline, but as an ever-growing cosmic forest. At the center lies the distant past, the early universe where everything began. From that origin, branches extend outward, each branch representing a different sequence of events, different histories, different worlds. Some branches may be almost identical to ours. Others may diverge so dramatically that their civilizations, planets, and galaxies look nothing like what we know. And somewhere within this immense branching structure might exist countless versions of Earth, some nearly identical, some radically different. There may be worlds where certain discoveries happened centuries earlier, worlds where major conflicts never occurred, worlds where entire civilizations followed completely different paths. And perhaps, somewhere among those branches, there exist worlds where your life unfolded in ways you never experienced. But the most unsettling possibility is not about those distant branches. It's about what might be happening right now. Because the branching of reality would not be limited to dramatic events. It could happen at every moment. When a particle moves left instead of right, when a neuron in your brain fires in one pattern instead of another, when you pause before making a decision. Each tiny event could split possibility into separate outcomes. And if those outcomes continue to exist in separate realities, then the universe might be multiplying constantly. Every second, every fraction of a second. A staggering number of new universes could be forming with every passing moment. It is almost impossible to imagine the scale of such a cosmos. But even if this idea feels abstract, it touches something deeply personal, because it suggests that your life, the version you experience, is one path through an enormous landscape of possibilities. The decisions you make guide the direction of that path. Every action nudges your story in one direction instead of another. Even if other possibilities exist somewhere beyond your awareness, the path you experience is still shaped by the choices you make. This brings us to one of the most powerful insights hidden inside the idea of branching realities. Choice still matters. In fact, it may matter more than we ever realized, because even if countless versions of the future exist, the version you experience is the one created by the decisions you make. Your effort, your courage, your persistence, your willingness to keep moving forward when the path ahead is uncertain. The existence of alternate possibilities does not erase the importance of action. It emphasizes it. Think of your life like a traveler moving through a vast forest of branching trails. Many paths exist. Some lead to places you cannot yet see. Some lead to challenges you cannot yet predict. Some lead to opportunities you cannot yet imagine. But you only walk one path at a time, and the direction you take depends on the steps you choose to make. Some people find the idea of many worlds unsettling. If every possibility exists somewhere, they wonder whether individual choices lose meaning. But the opposite might actually be true, because the only reality you will ever experience is the one shaped by the decisions you make. You cannot control every outcome. You cannot predict every consequence, but you can choose how you respond to the moments placed in front of you. You can choose curiosity over fear, action over hesitation, growth over comfort. And those choices slowly shape the story of your life. Even in a universe filled with infinite possibilities, your actions determine the path you travel. Somewhere, perhaps, other versions of you may exist, versions who made different decisions and live different lives, but they are not the ones experiencing this moment. You are. And that may be the most important truth of all, because the universe does not ask you to live every possible life. It asks you to live this one, to explore the path unfolding in front of you, to shape it with the choices you make today. And perhaps, in doing so, you are not just moving through reality, you may be helping create it. Right now, in this moment, with the decision you make next. So the next time you face a choice, large or small, pause for a moment and consider something extraordinary. Somewhere in the vast landscape of possibility, another path may exist where you chose differently. but the version of reality you will experience is the one you decide to walk into. And that raises the final question of our journey. If every choice might create a new version of you, then what kind of version do you want to become?